One of the promises of the Reformation was to return the church to Christ-centered worship. How's that worked out? Welcome back to Cultivating Truth. I'm your host, Robert. Thanks again for watching. So the Reformation figures made these promises of getting rid of these accretions, the doctrines of men, getting rid of all the barnacles and whatnot that have encrusted themselves over the pure gospel. And one of the ways they wanted to do this was to reform worship itself. And they made the bold claim that they were going to return the church to Christ-centered worship. Many of the Puritans would say things like people are engaged in will worship, right? Will worship by going to mass and that sort of a thing, because it's the will of man. All these things, the smells, the bells, this just comes from the mind of man. And so to engage in that sort of worship is to engage in will worship, as many of the Puritans would put it. Well, again, bold claims, bold promises. How has it worked out? And like everything within Protestantism, the proper way to engage in worship, it's debated endlessly. And so you have churches that range from a Lutheran church that looks very similar, in at least the classical Lutheran church that's holding to a traditional worship, will look very similar to a mass. Same thing with an Anglican church. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have a mega church where you don't even have a table or communion doesn't even happen. It's just a stage and there's a rock band playing and laser lights going. And the pastor may come descending in on harnesses. Like that's like this new thing they do. They come flying in, hovering over the congregation and doing all sorts of stuff like that. Fireworks going off. I remember years ago, the pastor in my neck of the woods, Perry Noble, he came riding in to church on an Easter Sunday on a motorcycle while AC/DC's Highway to Hell is playing on an Easter, okay? So, who's engaged in man-centered worship? Pray tell, okay? And so this is what Protestantism has descended into. They can't even agree on how to do worship properly. And I'll address this in subsequent videos, bringing up the Reformed understanding of the regulative principle of worship, which itself didn't clear anything up. But I'll bring that up in a subsequent video. So again, the proper way to worship, endlessly debated by Protestants. They can't agree on this, just like they can't agree on anything. And so how is this played out, particularly in the churches? Well, what you see is a reorientation of the sanctuary itself. The sanctuary itself, after the Reformation, got rearranged. In many cases, the altars were yanked out altogether, smashed, that sort of a thing, and removed. And what would they put in the place of the altar? They would put a pulpit. They would put a pulpit there. And because in their minds, again, with sola scriptura, the Bible is the main thing, and the preaching of the Bible is now the main thing. Sacraments, they don't do anything, right? And so the very structure of the sanctuary itself, the structure of the sanctuary itself during the Protestant revolt got rearranged. And what became at the center, oddly enough, here's the bitter irony, was a man behind a pulpit. Isn't that interesting? So while shaking their fists and saying, we're going to get back to Christ-centered worship, what'd they put in the center? A man with a Bible. Okay? Contrast this with the sanctuary design in any Catholic church. Doesn't matter if it's a modernist Catholic church with the ugly designs and all of that, the in the round design that the boomers seem to love for whatever reason. It doesn't matter whether it's a traditional classical Catholic church or these modernist ones, it doesn't matter. What will always be at the center is the altar. It's the altar. And who's going to be on that altar in the form of bread and wine? It's Christ. And so this brings us to the sacramentology itself. If Christ is really present in the Eucharist, then Protestants are missing out on the very core of worship. They're missing out on Christ-centered worship. If Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, if the bread and the wine are not mere symbols, but they truly do hold the body and blood of Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity, then Protestants are missing out on the very center of worship, namely the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, which is offered at each Mass, not re-offered, he's not re-sacrificed, but the once and for all sacrifice through the miracle of God is made present at each Mass. And the sanctuary reflects this. All attention is focused on the altar and the tabernacle where the consecrated hosts are kept. Every Catholic Church's design focuses on that. Why? Because Christ is at the center of the worship. Christ is present, and he's truly at the center of the worship there. And this brings me to kind of a contrast then. So in the Protestant church, how would you compare that? What would you compare that to? It's kind of like the synagogue, where it's just really a Bible study, right? And the Catholic Church, it's like the temple, where you have the unique presence of God. I mean, there's no place we can flee from the presence of God, but we know God was uniquely present in the temple. Because if you went in there and offered sacrifice in an improper way, you would die. And the priest would go into the Holy of Holies once a year to offer the sacrifice on the Day of Atonement, right? Well, the Holy of Holies is made present to us at each Mass. We're there. We're entering into that Holy of Holies at each Mass. The tabernacle, Christ, the once and for all sacrifice made present. So that's really the difference in my mind. You have synagogue, where you have a Bible study. Bible studies are great. I'm not meaning to disparage Bible studies. They're great. But they're not the once and for all sacrifice made present, where we get to take and eat. There's a stark difference here. So circling back a little bit to like the sanctuary, the orientation, and all of that. So think about it. You go into your average evangelical Protestant church. Again, what's going to be at the center? It's going to be a person, right? And so it's either they're in a pulpit, if it's a little more traditional, or they're just up on a stage. And there's a bunch of people, like the worship leaders, the pastor, strolling back and forth across the stage as he preaches for 45 minutes. There's going to be people that all the congregation's attention is focused on, right up front. Whereas at a Mass, the priest will be up there, but he's off to the side. The center is always the altar. The center is the tabernacle, where the hosts, where the body, blood, soul, and divinity is kept. So again, this is why the doctrine of the real presence of Christ matters. This is not just a secondary issue, as many people will try to assert. If Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, then again, Protestants are missing out on the actual core of Christian worship. But if Christ isn't present, and it is just a mere symbol, as many Protestants assert, then Catholics are the greatest idolaters. We're literally worshiping a piece of bread. And so that charge is true, if what they're saying is true. But thank God it's not. And this is what the church has always believed from the earliest post-apostolic writers that we have. They all believed in the real presence. They all believed Christ was really present in the Eucharist, that we were in some miraculous way feeding on the body and blood of Jesus Christ when we partook of the bread and the wine. This has been the theology of the church from the very beginning. So the departure comes with the Reformation. The departure comes from the Protestant revolt. This doctrine that Christ is truly present is not a new thing. The new thing comes with the Protestants that reduce it to a mere symbol. So that is where the departure comes. So again, just to wrap everything up here, try to keep it somewhat short. Who truly has the man-centered worship? Obviously, these churches where the pastor is swinging in on a suspension lines and hovering over the congregation and doing all sorts of bizarre things like that. That sure seems like man-centered worship to me. And then even the more traditional Protestant type churches, what's generally at the center? A pulpit. What's generally at the center of the whole movement of the worship? It's the sermon. A man up there talking for 45 plus minutes about the Bible. That's what's at the center of Protestant worship. So this is the bitter irony again. While making the broad, boastful, strong claim that we are going to get back to Christ-centered worship, they actually lost it. This is the bitter irony of the whole Protestant worship scheme. It actually brings us to man-centered worship. Like so many things within Protestantism, there's a bitter irony to it. While shaking their fist at the Catholic Church and saying, we need to change these things, you're doing it all wrong, they end up doing the very thing they claimed that they were setting out to fix. And again, contrast this with the Catholic Church and the Mass, where at each Mass, what's the movement? What's everything crescendoing up to in the Mass? It's the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, made present on the altar at every Mass. That's what every Mass is crescendoing up to. That's the center of every Mass. Physically, just optically looking at the structure of the sanctuary, but also the whole movement of worship is moving up to this point where we take and eat as Christ commanded us to. Well, thank you again for watching. May God bless you, and may Our Lady keep you.